of the Wright brothers is one of the most exciting in all of aviation, and the Birth of Aviation Pavilion tells that story in a unique way. The process of inventing the airplane is so engrossing and so captivating that dozens of pilots over the years have reinvented the flyer just to share the experience with Wilbur and Orville. In fact, the first thing you see when you enter the Birth of Aviation Pavilion is this, the 21st Century Flyer. This is an updated version of the flyer built by Utah State University students from Space Age Materials. And it really flies. Balderdash! Of course, the second thing you see is someone with a completely different opinion. Balderdash and poppycock! I am Professor Simon Newcomb, the most eminent scientist of the 19th century. Human flight is a fantasy, a misguided attempt to repeal the laws of gravity. If the deity, in his infinite wisdom, had intended for man to fly, he would have given him wings. Actually, Dr. Newcomb, if God had intended man to fly, he would have given him more money. Fortunately for the Wright Brothers Aeroplane Company, we have had many generous partners to help us overcome obstacles like those. These include the Wright family, the United States Air Force, the Boonshoff Museum of Discovery, the Dayton International Airport, and many other Dayton businesses, associations, and volunteers. What the deity in his infinite wisdom did give to mankind, and to the Wright brothers, was the ability to dream, and the genius and the gumption to achieve those dreams. Our walk-through timeline here in the Birth of Aviation Pavilion begins in 1878 with the brothers' childhood, when Bishop Milton Wright, their father, brings home this tiny rubber band-powered helicopter and begins Wilbur and Orville dreaming of flight. We next see the Wright brothers in 1889 in the printing business in Dayton, Ohio, still full of dreams and promise and a certain quirky sense of humor, as this copy of The Midget, their very first newspaper, shows us. On to 1896, and the enterprising Wright brothers now have two businesses. They're still printing, and now they're manufacturing and selling a brand new form of transportation, the safety bicycle. Suddenly, three things happen that revive their dreams of flight. First, Sam Langley flies Aerodrome number 5, making a sustained but unmanned powered flight. Octave Chanute builds and flies the Chanute Herring Glider, a new form of airplane that will come to be called the biplane. And Otto Lilienthal, the world's first successful pilot, plummets to his death in his hang glider when it goes out of control. The Wright brothers were captivated with the problem of how to control an aircraft in the air. They were convinced that they could do a better job of it than Lilienthal had. One day in the bicycle shop, Wilbur noticed that when he squeezed the corners of an inner tube box, the sides twisted. Immediately, Wilbur realized that he could apply this method to a biplane, twisting the wings and rolling the aircraft in the air. He built a model glider to prove his point. It was the beginnings of a revolutionary aerodynamic control system. The next step was to try his idea on a man-carrying aircraft. So he and Orville built a small glider in Dayton, Ohio, and took it to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, where there was enough wind to launch the aircraft and enough soft sand to catch them in case they fell. They took with them a small collection of scientific instruments and became the first scientists ever to measure the forces on a wing in flight. What they found they didn't like, because this glider didn't produce enough lift for them to truly fly. The 1901 Wright glider had almost twice the wing surface as the 1900, but still it didn't produce enough lift, and it was almost uncontrollable in the air. From this, the Wright brothers learned that they had to do some basic research in aerodynamics. They devised clever experiments where they mounted airfoils to their bicycles and to these balances, which they placed in this homemade wind tunnel. They studied over 200 different wing shapes, drawing back the elusive laws of physics that allow us to fly. The end result of all this research was the 1902 Wright glider. From the moment the Wright brothers threw this into the air, they knew they had a winner. Lots of lift, lots of control. They made over 2,000 flights in this aircraft, practicing the skills they needed to control an airplane in the air. In fact, this was the first fully controllable airplane ever. They had wing warping for roll, an elevator for pitch, and a rudder for yaw. With the control problem licked, there was just one thing left to do: add power. The Wright brothers looked everywhere for a suitable engine for their aircraft, but couldn't find any. So they did what they always did. They made their own. They even made a few innovations: an aluminum block, overhead valves, even a primitive form of fuel injection. The completed engine produced 12 horsepower, barely enough, the Wright brothers figured, to get them off the ground. So the stage was set for December 17th, 1903. With the engine roaring in his ear and the propellers turning at 400 RPM, Orville loosed the rope that held him to the ground. The flyer began to move forward, gaining speed as it rolled down the rail, and Orville lifted into the air on the first sustained, controlled, powered flight. In the middle of our pavilion is a replica of the hangar that the Wright brothers built at Huffman Prairie in 1904. We use it as a theater, where we show selections from the new documentary Kitty Hawk, in which we do up. On one end of Huffman Prairie Hangar, we have a small bookstore where you can read the latest books or even see the latest videos on the Wright brothers and Pioneer Aviation. As much as people like to see Wright Brothers airplanes, they also like to see them being built. And at the Wright Brothers Aeroplane Company, that's one of the things that we do best. So we carve a propeller out of a solid block of wood right before their very eyes, using the very same equipment that the Wright brothers used 100 years ago. Everyone who hears the story of the Wright brothers always wonders what it would be like to have made that first flight. Well, we answer that question right here on these simulators. You can fly that virtual flyer exactly the same way that Wilbur and Orville flew their flyer 100 years ago. Better yet, you can keep on practicing till you get it right. The invention of the airplane didn't end in 1903 with those first flights. The Wright brothers still had years of work ahead of them to make their invention truly practical. We have two examples of the world's first practical airplane here in the pavilion. This beautiful full-size replica was built by Mark Dusenberry, and this 1/10 scale model was built by Wayne Ulrey. And you know what? Both of them fly. In 1908, the Wright brothers developed the world's first military aircraft. This static model was built by Joe Fallow, one of the truly great aviation artists. The last airplane in our timeline is the 1911 Wright Model B. This was the first commercial aircraft manufactured by the Wright Company, a company started by, who else? The Wright brothers. This replica was built by EAA Chapter 610 and is only partially covered so you can see the inner workings of a Wright airplane. And finally, as you exit the timeline, we have two special treats, two relics of the Wright brothers. This original Wright propeller is the only part of an airplane ever signed by one of the brothers. Orville Wright's signature is right there. And finally, we have a piece of the true cloth, a swatch of Pride of the West muslin given to us by the Wright family. This cloth once covered the wings of the 1903 Wright Flyer and lifted it into the air on December 17, 1903, a date we all remember as the birth of aviation. Well, if we've got you hooked on the Wright story, visit our gift store. We've got hats, we've got t-shirts, we've got flyers, we've got pins and pouches, books and videos. Everything that you need to make your visit to the Birth of Aviation Pavilion truly memorable.